It starts with sweaty palms. You try your best to gather the immediate surroundings as you see the crowd growing. You look for the closest exits. It makes you feel dizzy and you start breathing heavily. You feel nauseous. You're far more anxious than you should be, given the relative safety of the situation. But your mind goes to different places. You envision the crowd turning for some reason, of everyone rushing to the closest door as though their lives were on the line. The chaos that ensues. I've lived through it, and I wish to share it with you all today. Most people don't understand just how quickly a large, orderly crowd can turn into absolute anarchy, of just how disgusting and appalling the entire mob becomes. They might read a headline, 4 trampled at overcrowded event, and think that it sounded terrible. But they've never really thought about just how horrible such an experience would be. Some of us do think about it. Constantly. The moment we're in anything close to being considered a crowd, it's precisely where our mind goes. And it terrifies us. It makes us scared of even existing. Enochlophobia, it's called. The fear of crowds. Or more specifically, the fear of what a crowd can become. I haven't always suffered from it. In fact, it's actually very new to me. 4 months ago is when I first started feeling discomfort in a large crowd. I know it sounds crazy, but I think something supernatural was involved, as though my phobia was actually just a premonition. But more on that later. When my phobia set in, I became sort of a recluse. I usually work from home and only rarely need to go to my office. When I did need to go out, I avoided rush hours and crowds. I didn't understand where this phobia came from, but I already seemed controlled by it. I felt as though I wasn't supposed to leave my house, no matter what. So I tried as best I could to remain there. But then the problem occurred, when I had no choice but to go to work midweek during regular hours. When I was stuck with all those people in the office. When I wasn't able to get a taxi home. When I was left with no choice but to take the subway. When a track was closed and I was detoured to Central Station. When 80,000 people left the concert. When 80,000 people left the concert. And things would get much worse. I was walking through the station when the mad rush of concertgoers poured in. All my symptoms hit me at once. The sweating, breathing, dizziness. I couldn't hold it in any longer and I vomited into a trash can. And still more people came. It was getting close to shoulder. People weren't even moving any longer. It was congestion. I was stuck. Yes, it was a terrible situation for me to be in. And yes, I would have done anything to avoid it. But I was coping with it as best I could. I kept telling myself it wasn't the end of the world and I would be fine. And then I heard the screaming. It was dozens of people, about 150 feet away from me. Already people were starting to crowd together and push. And then, the gunshots rang out. Mayhem ensued. The mob started rushing towards any exit they could find. There was shouting, shrieking. The people around me pushed together so fast that I got swept away with them. At some points, my feet weren't even touching the ground. We were all just moving as one large mass. The gunshots rang out again. Even more hysteria crept into the crowd. My phobia was sidetracked for the moment. I was starting to realize how much danger I was actually in. I entered a survival mode. The chances of those bullets killing me were very slim. No, it was the mob that was the danger. And that's when I realized everyone around me was living my phobia. But when it's a real danger such as this, it's not a phobia at all. It's real. Your fear is real. Experience real. And you'll do whatever you can to survive. The mob of people quickly became congested as everyone poured towards the exits. We were all huddled together as more and more pushed into the mass. The closer you were to the exit, the more weight that was pushed against you. It was simply impossible for people to leave those tiny doors at the same speed that people were pushing towards them. The more frightened people became, the harder they pushed. And the harder they pushed, the more weight it put onto those near the exits. The more difficult it became for them to leave. The more difficult it made for them to draw breath. The tiny woman beside me looked as if she was suffocating. "Are you all right?" I shouted at her. She just looked back at me, expressionless. She was in shock. I think she was starting to figure out that she might die right here, at any moment. She then spoke. I still to this day am haunted by it. "This is all your fault," she said. I couldn't make any sense of it. Did she really just say that? Or, as a result of my phobia, had I started hearing things? I'm taller than average and can see over most adults. I saw that my section of the crowd, maybe 500 or so people, was trying to make it towards a double door exit, but very few people could leave at once. Very slowly, my group started making its way over. I almost lost my footing on a few occasions and would have fallen over if not for how close we were all huddled together. It took me a while to realize what I was almost tripping over. People. We were now trampling on dozens of people who had fallen. I couldn't see or hear much in the commotion, but I noticed that some of the people we trampled were still alive. Some would even grab at our feet as we shuffled over them. I stopped moving for just a moment and I looked down. My right foot was on a woman's neck. 7 people or so were standing on her in some way. Another person's foot was on her jaw. For just a moment, between all the crowd, our eyes locked. She was somehow, impossibly, still alive. I saw panic and confusion looking back at me. Terror. Horror. There's no way we could help her up. There was just no room. We were all barely able to breathe, let alone help those who had fallen. A woman behind me was somehow still holding onto a tiny crying baby. It looked about 6 months old. The people around her were trying as best they could to guide her through the mass. I looked away. I knew she wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. A man to my left had organized a few other men and I heard them shout, 1, 2, 3, and they together pushed hard against the crowd. They were able to create a tiny bit of space for just a moment, and the leading man was able to pull up from the ground what I assumed was his daughter. She appeared to be 10 years old. She was covered in blood. I don't think she was alive. The man looked at me, pointed. The anguish on his face was overbearing. "Look what you've done," he said. "How dare you? Look what you've done!" I looked around. In an instant, everything went silent. It felt like everyone in the room was staring at me. For just a moment. But then, all the sounds and movement returned in a blast. The woman with the 6-month-old was now screaming, "My baby! I've lost my baby!" I saw a man duck down into the crowd to try and get it. I didn't see him come back up. I doubt he ever did. "My baby," she kept screaming. "Shut up!" a man yelled back at her. "Your baby's dead. Everyone's dead." I looked ahead and saw that the mob had finally pushed me close to the exit. But it wouldn't be easy to get out. So many people had fallen near the doors that the only way out was to climb up a ramp of bodies. This was not a rare occurrence. If you have the stomach for it, Google such events. The station nightclub fire comes to mind. So many bodies pile up that the exits get blocked. I started making my way up the ramp. If I had to estimate, I would say it was a pile of approximately 50 bodies. Most dead. Some still clinging to life. The man in front of me was elderly and was moving slowly. Those who can't keep up get buried below. I know it's cold to say it, but we weren't human beings any longer. We were animals, desperate for a way out. Any way out. The people behind me had caught up. They were about to climb over me. I could feel them. I had no other choice. I jumped onto the elderly man to climb over him. Then the others followed behind me. He was stuck, permanently. He couldn't get out. I made it to the top and had just enough room to squeeze through the door frame to get out. I heard the old man shout from behind me, "You're not going anywhere." But I was on the ground. I had made it, and there was no turning back. "Get back here!" I heard him yell from behind me. He was shouting over and over, "You can't leave. You were supposed to die here. This is your fault." But I left, to the sounds of hysteria, screaming, horror, death. Thousands of people were trampled that day. 240 casualties. Only 4 died from the shooting that started it all. Had those people really spoken to me like that? Said that it was my fault? That I was supposed to die there? I don't know. But it's what I remember. Maybe I was confronted so harshly with my biggest fear that my mind couldn't handle it. Maybe I only imagined that they said those things. And it's strange. Such a horrifying event should have made my phobia much worse. But that's not what happened. My Enochlophobia ended that day, and I haven't had any problems in the months since. I only suffered from Enochlophobia for 4 months of my life. I sometimes think it was a warning. It was a premonition of things to come. I somehow knew what was going to happen to me. And the phobia was created as a precaution to try and keep me at home and to protect me. And just the other day, another strange thing started occurring. I live on the 18th floor of my building and have never had a problem with heights. But if I look down now, I feel strange. It starts with sweaty palms. You try your best to gather the immediate surroundings as you see the ground getting closer and closer. You look for the closest areas of support and stability. But the heights make you feel dizzy, and you start breathing heavily. You feel nauseous. You're far more anxious than you should be, given the relative safety of the situation. But your mind goes to different places. You envision yourself starting to fall. Acrophobia, they call it. The fear of heights. I had never suffered from it before. Not in the slightest. No. It just started all at once that day in the apartment. Maybe it's another premonition. Maybe it's another warning. And maybe, just maybe, I should find a new apartment. Something that's on the first floor.